Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into the Ethiopian highlands, where the air is thin and cool, where mist clings stubbornly to the slopes, and where a certain unassuming shrub will quietly rewrite global history. Don't worry, you won't have to hike the whole mountain yourself. I'll drag you along gently. And if you're hoping this is going to be thrilling like an action movie, well, you probably won't survive this, because it's going to be slow, cozy, and about as dangerous as a warm blanket. The hills are alive not with music, but with goats. They scatter across the terraced slopes, nibbling at shrubs with a stubborn curiosity. Their herder, a boy whose name you'll never know, follows them lazily. He notices something strange. The goats aren't just eating leaves, they're chewing bright red berries. Minutes later, they're prancing, bleating, and generally behaving as if someone spiked their water trough with double espresso. You can almost hear the herder sigh, because try corralling hyperactive goats without the help of a dog. It's not pretty. This is the famous origin legend of coffee, told and retold so many times it's practically folklore wallpaper. Historians still argue whether this story has any grain of truth, or if it was a later bedtime invention to explain the bean's mysterious charm. But whether or not one boy and his over-caffeinated goats ever existed, the tale sets the stage. It captures what coffee has always been about: sudden, jittery bursts of energy in an otherwise sleepy world. You stoop and pluck one of the berries. The skin is taut, deep crimson, slightly sticky against your fingers. Bite into it, and the pulp is sweetish, but then comes the bean, hard and bitter, a flavor somewhere between burnt wood and regret. Still, in a world without energy drinks, smartphones, or endless scrolling, the discovery of a plant that wakes you up feels almost miraculous. Mainstream fact: Ethiopia is the birthplace of Coffea arabica, the species that still dominates world markets today. Genetic studies confirm that the greatest diversity of wild coffee plants is found in Ethiopia, a botanical signature pointing to its ancient roots. Here in these highlands, where fertile soil and steady rainfall nurture the plants, coffee had everything it needed to thrive long before humans realized its worth. But quirky tidbit: before coffee was brewed as a drink, some communities are said to have mixed the beans with animal fat, rolling them into little energy balls. Imagine a prehistoric protein bar, except instead of chocolate and oats, you're chewing coffee-flavored beef tallow. Delicious? Probably not. Effective? Absolutely. Picture a goat herder popping one before a long trek, grinning through the bitterness. The village nearby notices the goats too. Word spreads that these berries keep animals frisky. Some of the older folk mutter warnings. Strange plants bring strange consequences. Others are curious. They chew a few, wince at the bitterness, and wait. Minutes later, their hearts beat faster, their thoughts sharpen, and their eyes stay open long into the night. Someone whispers that maybe the gods tucked a secret inside these berries. Your senses drink in the moment: smoke curling from cooking fires, the rhythm of distant drums, the earthy smell of damp soil and livestock. The sky glows faintly with stars. Somewhere in the village, an elder experiments, pounding the beans, mixing them with water, and producing what must be the first prototype of coffee, a sludge that tastes like mud, but hints at possibility. Historians still argue whether coffee's discovery in Ethiopia happened once, in one place, or many times in scattered villages across the highlands. Oral tradition loves a single spark, one boy, one herd of goats, but reality is often messier, full of trial, error, and collective curiosity. You watch the herder that night, struggling to sleep. His goats still bounce in the moonlight, while he stares at the ceiling of his hut, wide awake, wondering if he's doomed or blessed. The next morning, though, he rises earlier, sharper, less groggy than before. He starts to think maybe those berries aren't a curse at all, but a gift. The highlands themselves seem to hum with this secret. Coffee trees, wild and tangled, dot the slopes like green firecrackers waiting to ignite. Nobody knows yet that this plant will sail oceans, inspire empires, fuel revolutions, and sit steaming on billions of breakfast tables. Right now, it's just a curiosity, an odd berry that wakes up goats and villagers whisper. You close your eyes and lean back and feel the rhythm of a story just beginning. The earth beneath you is fertile, the night alive with insect songs, the air tinged with wood smoke. You hold a handful of berries and know they are more than they appear. Their future is unimaginable, but their energy is undeniable. And so, with one small bite in the Ethiopian highlands, the long, quiet rise of coffee begins. The morning in the highlands wakes slowly, with a pale haze lifting from the valley floor. You're still carrying those crimson berries in your palm, their skins sticky from last night's curious taste test. Today, the goats seem calmer, but the village is restless. Word has spread about the strange fruit that kept people awake, and now everyone wants to know, was it a blessing or a slow-working poison? You trail behind a group of elders as they squat around a clay pot. They've crushed the beans again, mixing them with mashed grains and a little honey. The result looks suspiciously like the world's first experimental energy bar, dense, sticky, and held together by blind optimism. One elder takes a tentative bite, chewing slowly as if expecting lightning to strike. Minutes pass, nothing. Then, suddenly, his posture sharpens, his eyes widen, and he chuckles with unexpected vigor. It's the ancient equivalent of someone realizing an espresso shot hits harder than tea. Mainstream fact, early communities in Ethiopia often consumed coffee as a food rather than a drink, grinding the beans into a paste and rolling them into balls for sustenance during travel or work. This predates the now familiar practice of roasting and brewing. For generations, coffee was fuel more than flavor. Quirky tidbit. Some accounts suggest that coffee leaves were boiled into a kind of tea, producing a grassy, mildly stimulating drink. Imagine sipping a watery kale latte with an aftertaste of wet bark. Yet people return to it, proof that humanity has always been willing to endure questionable flavors if it means staying awake a little longer. You watch the younger villagers get bolder. They chew berries straight from the branch, laugh at the bitterness, and dare each other to swallow without flinching. One boy claims he stayed awake through the entire night, weaving baskets by firelight. Another insists he saw spirits dancing in the dark, fueled by the berries' magic. Already, myths sprout like roots. Coffee isn't just food, it's a doorway. The scene shifts to a smoky hut where women spread beans on mats to dry. They hum softly, the rhythm of their song blending with the crackle of fire. The beans darken in the sun, and though no one quite knows why they're saving them, there's a sense of importance in the gesture. Maybe this is how the first roast began, not from knowledge, but from curiosity and accident. Historians still argue whether coffee culture in Ethiopia was shaped primarily by chance discovery or by deliberate experimentation. Did villagers stumble upon a roasted bean that fell into the fire, inhaled its smoky aroma, and realized it might taste better cooked? Or was the path more gradual, guided by generations of small tweaks, drying, grinding, mixing, until a true beverage was born? For now, the village accepts coffee as both tool and talisman. Hunters carry pockets of beans on long treks, chewing them before the chase. Mothers tuck them into woven pouches, doling them out to children during long walks. Elders claim the berries sharpen memory, while skeptics still mutter about stomach aches and unnatural wakefulness. You kneel beside a woman who is pounding beans with a stone. The sound is rhythmic, soothing, like a drumbeat echoing the heart. The powder she produces smells faintly sweet, though the bitterness remains. She sprinkles it into porridge, stirring with care. When she hands you a bowl, the taste is odd, but energizing, a meal that lingers in your veins more than on your tongue. The goats, meanwhile, watch from the hillside. They chew grass innocently, as if they never embarrassed themselves by dancing under the moon. You can't help but smirk. After all, how many global revolutions owe their origins to clumsy livestock? By dusk, the village is awake longer than usual. Fires burn late, songs stretch past midnight, and laughter carries across the hills. Some say it's the berries, some say it's coincidence, but you can feel the difference. The night doesn't feel so heavy anymore. It feels alive. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of roasted grain and faintly charred beans. Someone, somewhere, has let a batch tumble too close to the fire. The air is richer now, more inviting, like the first note of a melody waiting to be sung. You breathe it in deeply and realize the story is beginning to take flavor. The night has stretched long, yet the village refuses to sleep. Fires still glow, voices still murmur, and the faint bitterness of crushed beans lingers on the air. You walk toward the monastery perched on the hillside, a small stone refuge with walls weathered by wind and prayer. Inside, monks in rough woolen robes chant in deep, rolling tones, their voices weaving together like waves breaking against stone. Their eyes, however, droop with fatigue. The vigils are long, and midnight devotion often blurs into drowsy repetition. Then, almost by accident, one monk discovers the berries the villagers have been passing around. He chews a handful, grimaces at the taste, and then, miracle, his eyelids stop sagging. Soon, others are following suit. Word spreads that the berries help prayers stretch into dawn. You sit in the smoky hall, watching their ritual shift. Where once they nodded and stumbled, now they chant with renewed strength, voices rising into the night. Mainstream fact: historical accounts suggest that Ethiopian monks used coffee as an aid during long hours of prayer, likely consuming it in simple, crude forms before the practice of roasting beans was established. Their use of the plant framed coffee as a sacred ally rather than a casual refreshment. The monks eventually experiment with roasting. Perhaps a bean drops into the fire, its aroma drifting through the hall like incense. One monk stirs it from the ashes, crushes it, and pours hot water over it. The liquid is dark, smoky, and startlingly bitter, but it works. You take a sip and feel warmth spread through you, sharper and cleaner than chewing the berry raw. Coffee as drink is born not in a marketplace, but in a monastery, under the glow of oil lamps and the rhythm of prayer. Quirky tidbit: some traditions say coffee was called the miracle drug of God, while others whisper it was seen as a form of edible incense. Imagine sipping a beverage and convincing yourself it's basically prayer fuel. It's the spiritual equivalent of modern energy drinks marketed as liquid focus. The chants swell, filling the chamber. The monks' hands tremble slightly as the brew courses through their veins, but their words remain steady. Pages of scripture are copied with renewed clarity, voices rise in hymns, and the night no longer feels like an enemy. The bitterness in their cups becomes a symbol of endurance, a taste tied to divine work. Historians still argue whether the first brewed coffee began here in Ethiopia or whether Yemen deserves the credit. Some say Ethiopian monks carried the idea across the Red Sea, while others insist Yemeni Sufi mystics perfected the brew independently. The truth may never be clear, but in this smoky hall, the narrative feels real, tangible, almost inevitable. You watch as the ritual deepens. Before each prayer, a small cup is poured. The monks cradle their vessels like relics, sipping slowly, savoring the warmth. The fire pops, shadows flicker on stone walls, and the night air hums with discipline rather than exhaustion. Coffee has shifted from curiosity to necessity, from berry to brew, from accident to ritual. Step outside and the air is sharp, full of stars. The monastery perches above the valley like a guardian, its windows glowing faintly with lamplight. Inside, the chants continue, rising into the sky. You think back to the herder's goats prancing under the moon and realize how far the berry has already traveled, from hillside snack to sacred drink.
The next morning, the monastery's chants still echo faintly in your head as you walk down toward the valley. But this time, you notice something new. A caravan has arrived. Donkeys carry woven baskets, camels plod with bundles strapped to their humps, and traders with sun-darkened faces barter and laugh in half a dozen languages. The air smells of leather, sweat, and spices, cumin, frankincense, maybe even cinnamon sneaking in from somewhere farther east. Among the sacks of grain and jars of honey, one small basket holds those familiar crimson berries. At first, the traders look skeptical. Why haul something bitter and awkward across the mountains? Yet curiosity wins. A few chew the berries, squint at the flavor, then smirk as the stimulant hits. Not bad, one murmurs, as if pretending he doesn't suddenly feel his heart race. Soon, the beans are tucked into trade packs alongside salt, ivory, and cloth. Coffee has stepped out of its village cradle and onto the open road. Mainstream fact: Ethiopia sat at the crossroads of important trade networks in the medieval period, with routes stretching toward the Red Sea and across the Horn of Africa. Coffee, though modest at first, piggybacked on these connections, spreading as word of its curious effects traveled with merchants. Quirky tidbit: some oral traditions claim coffee cherries were sometimes fermented into a kind of wine, sweet and mildly intoxicating. Basically, the first attempt at turning coffee into happy hour fuel. Imagine villagers clinking gourds of coffee wine under the stars, unsure whether they've invented a divine elixir or just a very strange beverage. The road is long. Dust swirls around the caravan's feet. You trudge along with them, feeling the rhythm of trade. Walk, barter, rest, repeat. At campfires, someone always brings out the beans. They roast a handful, grind them roughly, and pour hot water over them in battered clay cups. Each group has its own method. Some add spices. Others chew the grounds afterward. The taste is uneven, but the effect is undeniable. Travelers sing later into the night, guard shifts stay sharper, and deals at sunrise feel sharper. Historians still argue whether the beans were first exchanged deliberately as a trade good or whether they simply slipped along casually, tucked into packs as novelty snacks. Some records suggest coffee remained obscure for centuries before suddenly blossoming into fame, while others hint at a steady, quiet spread across the trade routes. You sit by the fire, sipping a smoky brew poured by one of the traders. Sparks rise into the dark sky, carrying the aroma upward. Around you, laughter rings out as a game of dice unfolds. Someone mutters about trying to sell the beans in a distant port. Someone else shakes his head, doubtful. And you sit quietly, knowing how wrong that doubt will prove. The caravan moves on, across rocky passes, down into lowlands, across rivers glinting in the sun. You can feel the momentum. Coffee is no longer bound to one valley or one monastery. It's riding on donkeys' backs, slipping into satchels, becoming a companion of merchants and wanderers alike. At one rest stop, a pouch of roasted beans falls, scattering into the fire. The air fills with a rich, heady aroma, sharper and more inviting than anything yet. Traders pause, sniff, and exchange glances. You watch them scramble to rescue the charred beans, grind them hastily, and sip the result. This time, the taste is different, deeper, almost pleasant. You smile quietly, knowing this accident will change everything. By the time the caravan disappears beyond the horizon, coffee has taken its first true steps away from its birthplace. No one here realizes it, but the berries are on a trajectory that will span oceans and centuries. What began as goats dancing under the moon is now a commodity, whispered about at campfires, tested in clay cups, and carried across the rugged arteries of trade. You stand in the dust, the smell of roasted beans still clinging to your clothes, and feel the quiet certainty that coffee's journey is unstoppable.
The dust of the caravan road settles behind you, and now your feet crunch against the salt air of the Red Sea coast. The horizon shimmers with sails, dhows with curved wooden hulls bobbing gently, ready to ferry spices, textiles, and now, hidden among them, baskets of unfamiliar beans. The crossing is short, but its impact is enormous. The beans make their way across the narrow sea to Yemen, where they will take root in soil that seems almost designed to nurture them. Here, the highland terraces of Yemen rise like giant stone steps above the desert. Farmers carve narrow ledges into the mountainsides, irrigating them with patient care. The beans from Ethiopia are planted here, and, miracle of climate, they thrive. Soon, Yemen is not just a port of transfer, but a birthplace in its own right for coffee culture. Mainstream fact: by the 15th century, Yemen was cultivating coffee systematically, becoming the world's first region to truly commercialize it. Its port city of Mocha emerged as the hub of coffee trade, so influential that the very word mocha is still linked to the drink centuries later. Quirky tidbit: Yemeni Sufi mystics were among the first to embrace coffee as a spiritual aid. They called it kawa, a word once used for wine, now repurposed for a sober drink that nonetheless stirred the soul. Picture a circle of mystics swaying gently in candlelight, sipping bitter brew between chants, insisting that it sharpened their connection to the divine. Basically, the first recorded all-nighter study session, except for God instead of exams. You find yourself in a dimly lit Sufi lodge. The floor is cool beneath your feet. Incense curls through the air, and the chanting rhythm fills the room like a heartbeat. A cup is pressed into your hands, small, handleless clay. The brew inside is black and hot, its surface trembling slightly. The taste is bitter, smoky, but not unpleasant. You drink, and suddenly, your eyelids refuse to droop. Your thoughts sharpen. The chant seems clearer. Coffee has slipped from novelty to necessity once again, this time wrapped in spiritual gravity. Historians still argue when exactly coffee crossed from Ethiopia to Yemen. Some place it as early as the 9th century. Others insist it was centuries later. The records are thin, the legends many. But what is certain is that Yemen became the place where coffee's potential exploded, not as an odd village snack, but as a cultivated crop and traded commodity. In the markets of Mocha, sacks of beans pile high, their aroma drifting into the salty breeze. Merchants haggle loudly, voices bouncing off stone walls. Ships creak as they are loaded with crates bound for Cairo, Istanbul, and beyond. Coffee is no longer just a drink, it is currency, status, identity. Quirky aside, Yemeni authorities, realizing their golden crop's value, tried to guard it jealously. They insisted beans be boiled before export to prevent them from germinating elsewhere. Spoiler, it didn't work. Smugglers, resourceful as always, slipped live seeds out in secret, ensuring coffee would not remain a Yemeni monopoly for long. The nights in Yemen are different than in Ethiopia. Here, coffee is not just chewed or mixed with grains. It is roasted carefully, brewed deliberately, and shared communally. A kind of proto-coffee house emerges in Sufi circles, a place where ideas and devotion mingle over steaming cups. You sit in one of these gatherings, the hum of conversation all around, and you realize coffee is no longer a local curiosity. It has become a bridge between wakefulness and sleep, between prayer and daily life, between continents. As dawn spills over the Yemeni hills, you stand on a terrace, the sea glinting far below, and see the neat rows of coffee plants swaying in the breeze. You can almost hear the world leaning closer, waiting to taste what this land has nurtured. Ships groan at anchor, merchants argue in the market, and you know the beans will not stop here. Coffee has found its first empire in Yemen, and from here it will ride the sails of dhows into history.
The Red Sea winds follow you northward, carrying the scent of salt and roasted beans until the shores of Egypt rise ahead. Cairo sprawls before you, a city of minarets and markets, a place where caravans and ships collide in a symphony of trade. Here, coffee finds its stage not just in prayer halls or farm terraces, but in the heart of bustling urban life. Step into the marketplace and you're engulfed by noise. Vendors shouting, donkeys braying, the clang of metalwork. Amidst the chaos, a new sound emerges, the clink of clay cups on wooden tables. You follow it down a narrow alley where lamps glow against plaster walls. A doorway opens, smoke drifts out, and inside you glimpse something unprecedented. The Kave Khane, the coffee house. Mainstream fact: by the early 16th century, Cairo and other Middle Eastern cities had thriving coffee houses. These were communal spaces where people gathered to drink, talk, and debate. They were revolutionary because they offered a non-alcoholic drink that energized rather than dulled, making them uniquely suited to discussion, games, and intellectual exchange. Quirky tidbit: some called these places the schools of the wise, praising their role in spreading knowledge. Others derided them as the schools of the idle, claiming men wasted time gossiping over cups instead of working. In other words, the eternal Cathay debate was already alive 500 years ago. You take a seat on a worn cushion as a steaming cup is set before you. The liquid is black, bitter, and slightly gritty at the bottom. Around you, men lean close, arguing about trade taxes, reciting poetry, and whispering political rumors. In one corner, two players bend over a chessboard, brows furrowed. In another, a man recites verses to a small audience. The air vibrates with ideas as much as with caffeine. Authorities, of course, are suspicious. Coffee houses make people talk too much, too freely. You overhear whispers of bans, edicts declaring coffee sinful or disruptive. For a time, soldiers even barge in to shut them down. But the closures never last. The people crave these spaces too deeply, their energy too intoxicating to resist. Coffee houses reopen again and again, each ban fizzling like steam escaping from a kettle. Historians note that Cairo's coffee houses quickly became essential social institutions, blending the sacred roots of coffee with secular vibrancy. They were places where clerics might argue theology beside merchants debating grain prices, where gossip and scholarship mingled freely. The atmosphere is dense with humanity, smoke, laughter, the scrape of dice on a board. The coffee itself is harsh, but nobody seems to care. What matters is the alertness, the ability to stay sharp through long discussions, to push the night further. You sip again, and suddenly the idea of going home to sleep seems absurd. One storyteller leans into the firelight, sprinkling grounds into his cup like ritual dust. His voice drops, and the crowd leans closer. Tales of distant sultans, miraculous saints, and hidden treasures spill into the room. You realize coffee has become not just fuel for conversation, but a companion to imagination. Outside, Cairo's streets hum even as the night deepens. Coffee houses are multiplying, spilling across the city. Some are lavish, hung with lamps and carpets. Others are simple stalls with only benches and smoke-stained walls. Yet each one pulses with the same heartbeat: coffee as community. As dawn seeps over the Nile, you step outside, blinking at the pale sky. Behind you, the murmur of voices still rolls from the coffeehouse doors. Cairo has given coffee a new form, not just a solitary prayer aid or a merchant snack, but a stage for society itself. You realize the drink is no longer just surviving bans or fueling monks. It is reshaping how people gather, how they talk, how they imagine the world. And in that realization, you sense that coffee's true revolution has only begun.
The road from Cairo curls ever eastward until the domes and spires of Istanbul rise from the water like a jeweled crown. Ships clog the Golden Horn, gulls wheel overhead, and the scent of roasting beans now mingles with the spice of the bazaars. You have reached the capital of the Ottoman Empire. The empire where coffee will not only thrive, but become woven into the very fabric of court and street alike. Step inside a kahvehane, an Ottoman coffee house, and you are struck first by the sound. Dice clatter, storytellers spin tales, and voices debate with the sharpness of blades. The room is warm with braziers, carpets soften the floor, and smoke from roasting beans coils upward like incense. Coffee here is brewed strong, thick, often flavored with cardamom, and served in delicate porcelain cups without handles. You take one, sip carefully, and feel the strength of it settle in your chest like a slow-burning coal. Mainstream fact: Ottoman coffee houses became legendary as centers of social and political life. They offered more than a drink. They offered conversation, poetry, music, and even entertainment such as shadow plays. They were so influential that the Ottoman court appointed an official coffee brewer, the kahvecibashi, responsible for the Sultan's daily supply. Quirky tidbit: Ottoman marriage contracts sometimes included a clause that if a husband failed to provide his wife with adequate coffee, she could seek divorce. Imagine the seriousness of a society where no coffee, no marriage was a legal standard. The authorities, naturally, were uneasy. Coffee houses were not just places of leisure, they were breeding grounds for ideas. A ruler could ban alcohol,
but how to suppress a drink that sharpened minds and encouraged debate. Several times sultans attempted to ban coffee outright, fearing sedition whispered in dark corners. Soldiers smashed cups, closed doors, threatened fines, and yet, just as in Cairo, the bans never stuck. The people would not give up their kafehane. Inside, you listen as a storyteller performs a shadow play. Figures cut from leather dance against a cloth screen, their movements exaggerated while the audience roars with laughter. Between scenes, the storyteller sips coffee, his voice rich with caffeine and smoke. Across the room, another man swirls the grounds at the bottom of his cup, squints at the patterns, and proclaims fortunes, love, wealth, danger, half serious, half playful. Coffee here is not just drink, it is ritual, amusement, even prophecy. Historians debate whether Ottoman coffee culture made the empire more democratic in spirit or merely more restless. Did the kafehane give ordinary citizens a voice, or did it simply distract them with entertainment? The truth may lie somewhere in between. What is certain is that the coffee house became an institution the empire could never fully suppress. You step back out into Istanbul's night. Lanterns glow on the Bosphorus, the muezzin's call echoes across the water, and the streets still buzz with coffee-fueled conversations. In the Sultan's palace, a porcelain cup sits waiting, its contents guarded as carefully as gold. In the alleys, workers gather in humble shops, finding in their coffee a brief escape from labor. The drink has transcended class, weaving itself into every level of Ottoman life. And yet, the empire cannot contain it forever. Ships creak at the docks, carrying beans outward towards Venice, Vienna, Paris, and London. Coffee, once a secret of highland goats, has become the lifeblood of an empire. Soon it will leap again, crossing into Europe, where it will spark revolutions of thought as surely as it has fueled chants and shadow plays. You take one last sip from a small porcelain cup, grounds clinging stubbornly to your tongue, and watch as sails fill with wind. Coffee is leaving Istanbul, and the world is waiting. From the domes of Istanbul, your journey drifts westward, across the Mediterranean until the green and gold shimmer of Venice comes into view. Here, canals cut through the city like veins of quicksilver. Gondoliers sing off-key ballads, and merchant stalls overflow with silks, spices, and strange curiosities from every edge of the known world. Into this carnival of trade, coffee quietly slips ashore. At first, it is exotic, even suspicious. Doctors prescribe it as medicine, sometimes for digestion, sometimes for melancholy, occasionally for ailments so vague they could be anything from toothaches to bad moods. Apothecaries stock it alongside dried herbs and powders, each scoop of beans treated more like a tincture than a drink. Wealthy Venetians sip it cautiously in their villas, noses wrinkled at the bitterness, unsure whether they're indulging in a cure or a vice. Mainstream fact: Venice became one of the first European gateways for coffee in the early 1600s, thanks to its position as a major port connecting the Ottoman Empire to the continent. From there, coffee houses began to emerge, offering a new form of social life, distinct from taverns and wine halls. Quirky tidbit: Pope Clement VIII was once asked to condemn coffee as the bitter invention of Satan. Instead, after tasting it, he reportedly declared it so delicious
that it would be a sin to let only unbelievers drink it. In one sip, coffee was effectively baptized into European culture. You wander through the narrow streets until you find yourself inside a café, a Venetian coffee house. Light filters through smoky glass windows, chandeliers sparkle faintly, and men in wigs and embroidered coats lean across polished tables. The coffee here is served hot and strong, sometimes sweetened with sugar newly imported from colonies overseas. You lift the porcelain cup, delicate, painted with tiny flowers, and the brew inside tastes both familiar and transformed. In these cafes, debates unfurl like opera arias. Merchants argue over shipping contracts, philosophers dissect Aristotle, and local gossips murmur about whose gondola was seen outside whose villa last night. Unlike the noisy Ottoman kahvekhan, the Venetian cafe prides itself on elegance, velvet curtains, fine china, and a hint of exclusivity. And yet, despite the refinement, the same energy pulses beneath the surface. Coffee fuels conversations that stretch late into the night, ideas sparked and shared over steaming cups. Soon Venetian cafes multiply, each one a small republic of thought, curiosity, and caffeinated boldness. Historians note that from Venice, coffee spread rapidly to other European cities, Vienna, Paris, London, Rome, each shaping the drink to its own character. Venice was not just a port of trade, but the hinge between East and West, the city where coffee transformed from foreign curiosity to fashionable European staple. The debate, of course, followed. Doctors warned of overstimulation, priests worried about morality, and skeptics muttered that coffee houses encouraged idleness. But in Venice, at least, the tide was unstoppable. By the late 1600s, coffee was a fixture, its aroma drifting through canals, its reputation sealed as both medicine and pleasure. You step back outside, the hum of gondolas rising in the twilight, and notice how seamlessly coffee has folded itself into Venetian life. From the villa to the street stall, from apothecary jars to gilded cafes, the drink has arrived. Somewhere a bell tolls, echoing across the water. Ships rest at anchor, their holds filled with beans, their captains eager for profit. Beyond the lagoon, Europe waits. And you know, as you taste the lingering bitterness on your tongue, that coffee's next act will be even louder.
From the canals of Venice, you cross the channel and find yourself beneath the soot-dark skies of 17th century London. The city is bustling, muddy, loud, a place of plague, fire, rebuilding, and restless energy. Here, coffee does not slip politely into salons or pharmacies. It storms into tavern culture and reinvents itself entirely. Push open the crooked door of the Turk's Head, one of London's earliest coffee houses, and you're greeted with a smell both unfamiliar and exhilarating. Harshly roasted beans boiled into a strong, bitter brew. For a penny, you're handed a steaming dish. Yes, dish, not cup, filled with black liquid that tastes somewhere between soot and medicine. And yet, you drink. Everyone drinks. Mainstream fact. London coffee houses earned the nickname penny universities. For the price of a single penny, you could buy a cup and a seat, then access hours of debate, news, and knowledge. They became hubs of intellectual and commercial life, democratizing conversation in ways taverns never had. Quirky tidbit. Coffee houses were so disruptive that in 1674, A satirical pamphlet titled The Women's Petition Against Coffee accused the drink of making men impotent, as unfruitful as the deserts whence that unhappy berry is said to be brought. It seems even then people were worried about what caffeine was doing to romance. Inside the Turk's head, the room buzzes with chatter. Merchants wave contracts, clergymen mutter theology, and poets declaim verses no one really asked to hear. Each table seems to host its own republic. Here, astronomers chart the heavens. There, pamphleteers gossip about Parliament. You sip again, grimace at the bitterness, and realize the coffee isn't the point, it's the fuel. The real commodity here is conversation. As the decades pass, coffee houses multiply like wildfire. By the 1660s, there are hundreds across London, each with its own clientele and character. Some cater to stockbrokers, where the chatter of trade evolves into the foundations of the London Stock Exchange. Others, like Edward Lloyd's Coffee House, become hubs for maritime insurance, eventually giving birth to Lloyd's of London. In a way, whole financial empires were drafted over chipped wooden tables with coffee stains still damp on the parchment. Of course, not everyone is thrilled. King Charles II, eyeing the ferment of political debate, declared coffee houses hotbeds of sedition and tried to ban them in 1675, but the backlash was immediate and overwhelming. The public refused to give up their cups. The ban was rescinded within days. The king learned what rulers from Cairo to Istanbul already knew. Once coffee takes root, it is nearly impossible to outlaw. The atmosphere inside a London coffee house is a strange mix of high and low. The room smells of wet wool, ink, and scorched beans. The benches are hard, the drinks unpleasant, and yet men keep pouring in. They come not for luxury, but for access, for the chance to trade ideas, sharpen arguments, and leave better informed than they arrived. Historians sometimes debate whether these coffee houses were truly democratic. After all, women were largely excluded, and much of the clientele was middle or upper class. But even with their limits, coffee houses carved out a radical space, a common room where wit and reason, not rank or wealth, decided who commanded attention. You leave the Turk's Head late at night, head buzzing more from the debates than from the caffeine. The streets of London are dark, the Thames reeks at low tide, and smoke hangs in the damp air. But you carry something new, a sense that coffee has become not just a beverage, but an engine of society. In a city once fueled by ale, people now sit sober, alert, and argumentative into the small hours. Coffee in London has done more than caffeinate. It has rewired the city's nervous system. And as you watch merchants, poets, and politicians vanish into the fog, you know this drink will continue to shape revolutions far beyond the wooden walls of the coffee house.
From London's fog, you drift south to Paris, where the Seine glitters beneath lamplight and the air hums with the chatter of salons. Here, coffee does not taste like burnt soot in chipped dishes. No, the French turn it into something altogether more refined, something sweet, elegant, and intoxicatingly fashionable. Step into Café Procope, opened in the late 1600s, and the difference is immediate. Chandeliers flicker overhead, velvet drapes soften the walls, and marble-topped tables gleam beneath the glow of candles. Instead of rough benches, you're offered a proper chair. Instead of sludgy black liquid, a porcelain cup of smooth, sweetened coffee, perhaps with a dash of cream. The bitterness is tamed. The drink is civilized. Mainstream fact. Café Procope is considered Paris's first great café, and it became a gathering place for Enlightenment thinkers such as Voltaire, Rousseau, and Diderot.
Coffee houses in Paris were not just social hubs, but intellectual forges, shaping revolutionary debates that would ripple across Europe. Quirky tidbit: Voltaire reportedly drank up to 50 cups of coffee a day, often laced with chocolate. Doctors warned him it would kill him. Instead, he lived into his 80s, outlasting nearly all his critics. Apparently, caffeine can fuel philosophy as well as rebellion. The cafe around you brims with life. Philosophers declaim against monarchy, poets compose lines on napkins, and pamphleteers scribble furiously between sips. In one corner, actors rehearse lines for Comédie Française. In another, politicians mutter conspiracies that may one day ignite revolutions. Coffee here is more than drink. It is liquid rebellion, poured steaming into porcelain. And yet, it's not all politics. Parisian cafes refine the ritual of coffee into art. Croissants, imported from Austria's Kipferl, pastry appear on plates beside the cups, becoming inseparable from the Parisian breakfast. Waiters glide between tables in crisp aprons, offering sugar bowls and cream jugs, transforming what was once bitter medicine into a luxurious pleasure. Historians noted that coffee houses in Paris blurred the boundaries of class. Nobles, writers, lawyers, and merchants could all, at least in theory, sit under the same chandelier and share a table. While inequality still ruled outside, inside the cafe, ideas were the great leveler. That said, the true radicals of the city, women, laborers, and the very poor, were still excluded. Enlightenment had its limits, even when fueled by caffeine. Still, the conversations brewing here ferment into something extraordinary. Encyclopedias are planned, revolutions imagined, philosophies sharpened. The aroma of coffee mingles with the musk of wigs, the wax of candles, and the sweat of men convinced they are changing the world. And in truth, they are. You finish your cup, fingers sticky from sugar, and step out into Paris's night. Carriages clatter past, the Seine reflects the stars, and you sense the city pulsing with caffeinated thought. Coffee has become more than a commodity. It is now an instrument of culture, style, and revolution. From goats in Ethiopia to philosophers in Paris, the journey has been improbable and unstoppable. And as you walk along the riverbank, listening to laughter and debate spilling from every cafe window, you realize the story is far from finished. The beans will keep traveling, to colonies, to plantations, to continents yet untouched. But here, in Paris, coffee has crowned itself king of conversation. The quiet rise is no longer so quiet. The world is awake.